I'm looking for Route 66. Well, more accurately, I'm looking for something that used to be Route 66, because this historic roadway is no longer a single continuous route. It's been chopped up into various state highways. So we're going to have to drive through multiple states and cross the Mississippi River twice in order to experience all that remains of the very first highway in the United States. In fact, it's so fragmented now that Google Maps won't even let us navigate its full length. But that doesn't mean we can't do it. We just have to use our brains and follow the old alignment signs. Some are still standing along the route, but they don't always point us in the right direction. We need to pay close attention to the small details to make sure we stay on track. Like this sign warns us that trucks are prohibited beyond this point, so we know we're headed in the right direction. That's because the original Route 66 was never meant to accommodate large commercial vehicles, and many sections of the road remain too narrow for them today. The whole country was a lot different when this road was built. There were barely any towns out here, and if you did come across one, it was likely nothing more than a house with an attached general store. Here's one such example. It's called Glen Rio, and it sits about 20 miles north of Amarillo, Texas, on what used to be Route 66. This one's a little different though, because while most of these abandoned businesses have fallen into disrepair, this one has been lovingly restored. I really wish we could have stopped in for a slice of pie, but unfortunately they were closed. Still, I was able to look through the window and see a whole bunch of pies, and that was enough for me. Speaking of slices, the next slice of Route 66 we'll be visiting is near Shamrock, Texas, where we'll get to see one of the most well-known pieces of Americana, the U-Drop-In. This is a gas station and restaurant that looks exactly like the ones you would see in old Route 66 travel ads from the 1930s. But it wasn't always this way. For decades after the U-Drop-In opened in 1938, it looked pretty run down. That was until the town's Chamber of Commerce bought it in 1975 and began the lengthy process of turning it into a museum dedicated to the history of Route 66. Every room is filled with vintage gas station memorabilia, old cars, and countless Route 66 artifacts. And outside you can pose with some vintage cars and trucks, including this classic fire-engine red 1953 Chevy pickup truck. And yes, that's me in the back. I've always wanted to be in one of these old photos, and I finally got my chance. Next, we're off to Oklahoma, where we'll visit the historic town of Elkhart, which sits along what was once known as the Rock Island Route, or the Rock for short. The town was founded by railroad workers who were building the Missouri, Kansas, and Texas line through Oklahoma Territory. And shortly after the railway reached this area, the government passed the law that allowed for the construction of paved roads. And the very first one they built was the Rock Island Route, which ran through Elkhart. It started in 1901 and took 4 years to complete. The highway went all the way from Memphis to San Bernardino, and travelers loved the convenience of being able to take the Rock Island Route by car instead of by train. Unfortunately, we can't drive down Main Street anymore. That's because a few years after Route 66 was decommissioned, the town constructed a bypass. And that means we're in for another case of Route 66 being replaced by a more modern roadway. So let's head over there and see how much of the old road we can find. And here we are at the old alignment of Route 66, also known as the Rock Island Route. It looks like not much has changed since the days when cars were driving down this road. The bridge hasn't changed at all, and the buildings are still standing too, except for this one here, which is missing a whole side. And speaking of things missing, I think I left my wallet back at the hotel. Nope, it's right here in my pocket. Phew. Now let's go explore some more abandoned bits of Route 66. We're now in the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma, and it's time to stretch our legs on a hike to some more abandoned bits of the Mother Road. These two buildings here are all that remains of the Colorado Avenue School, which sat right next to the highway in the town of Glenpool. Imagine walking to school every day with your lunch bucket, then getting dropped off by your parents in a car, and then having them drive home before the school bell rings. That was a thing people did back in the early days of Route 66, a typical school day for kids whose parents traveled for work. On our way to the next stop, we'll pass by this cool mural which depicts a 1940s-style gas station and diner. You know, like the U-Drop-In we saw earlier, but this one's a bit more colorful. And speaking of color, check out the colorfully painted water tower in the distance. That's our next stop on the Route 66 road trip. We're coming to the end of the segment of Route 66 that's still intact, and it leads us right to the town of Sand Springs. Here in Sand Springs, we'll visit one last gas station that's modeled after the ones that used to line the route. This one's called the Wagon Wheel, and it was built in 1993 to replicate a 1930s gas station. So it technically isn't vintage, but it does a great job of capturing the nostalgia of the era. There's also a cafe inside serving breakfast and lunch. And don't forget to check out the gift shop in the back. Inside, you'll find some pretty cool t-shirts and souvenirs. But now it's time to cross the Mississippi River and continue our journey on the original Route 66. We'll do that by taking a ferry from Blytheville, Arkansas to Memphis, Tennessee. While we're waiting to board the ferry, I'll tell you a little story. Back in 2014, when I was working on my first Route 66 road trip video, I made it all the way to Memphis, but I didn't get to show you anything because I got in a wreck right after crossing the Mississippi River. The driver in front of me slammed on his brakes for no reason, and when I stopped, a guy came running out of the woods on the side of the highway waving his arms. He told me I had to turn around because the road was closed ahead, and when I turned around, I saw that there was absolutely no reason for the other driver to have slammed on his brakes. There was a huge parking lot where the road ended, and it was clear that he had purposely tried to back into that spot. But why? I don't know. All I do know is that when I hit that spot with my rental car, it completely destroyed my transmission, and that's why my Route 66 video from 2014 didn't feature Memphis. Anyway, enough about the past. Let's talk about the present and what we'll be doing here in Memphis. The ferry ride takes us right to downtown Memphis, and if we walk in this direction, we'll end up at Beale Street. If we walk in that direction, we'll end up at the Rock and Soul Museum. And if we walk that way, we'll end up at the Mississippi River. But we're going to do something different. We're going to go south down Front Street towards the river, because that's the way the original Route 66 went. As soon as we get to the river, we'll turn right and head west. We won't have to go far because the original Route 66 ends at the Mississippi River here in Memphis, and this is about as far west as we'll get on the Mother Road. Our journey on the original Route 66 may be over, but our journey through the American road system is just beginning. To see where else we're going to travel next, watch this video. Thanks for watching.